Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Essay. Today we are gonna see what if Issei is adopted by Gabriel. Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Prologue. The woman did not want to believe the scene in front of her. 2 dead parents, an orphan child, and a murderer on the loose. As the family friend she was of the family along with Issei, the unknown woman was informed of the incident due to the fact that she was the first person to inform should something happen to one of the family members. Asking a few of the people about where he would most likely be taken, she began her search. The murderer or murderers wanted the family dead, but for what reason? Aside from knowing a few members of the church, they were nothing more, just your average Japanese family. With this in mind, she set off for the police station, several questions in mind. A couple of days had passed, and Issei was still recovering from the incident. One moment, it was an average family dinner. Father had returned from work, mother had set the table with his help, no unexpected visitors on their guest list or so they thought. All of a sudden, the doorbell had rung that day, and Mr. Haidu got up to answer it. The events after that were a blur, but the only thing Issei saw was how his parents were killed as he hid in the closet, doing his best to avoid being found by these unwanted beings, as he wrapped himself with the cloak his aunt had given him. As soon as the killers had left, he exited the closet and got on his knees, crying as he mourned the death of his parents. Minutes later, the police arrived courtesy of a neighbor who had gone to see what was going on after the house had become eerily silent, only to be interrupted by the child's crying, and the rest is history. Back to the present, he held an object that had the shape of a dagger, as the cloak was wrapped around this mysterious object. Was this the item his parents had been killed for? It was a dagger, nothing more to the child. His solitude was interrupted by several footsteps that were headed his way. Quickly hiding the item, Issei was looking at the door, awaiting the arrival of the director who was taking care of him. "Issei, you should eat something before going to bed. Come, the others are waiting for you," she says, holding his hands and looking up at him. Without much of a reason to be awake except to eat, the child stood up and went with her to the dining room, sitting along with a few children as they were awaiting their final meal of the day. The next morning. As the day began, a blonde-haired green-eyed woman in a nun outfit was waiting outside of the building, awaiting for someone to open the door for her. She was quickly received by the director, who gave her a soft smile. "Good morning, how may I help you?" the director asked, letting her in. "Yes, it is concerning Issei Haidu. I was informed of his incident and according to several documents, I have been given full custody of him as his legal guardian," she says, presenting to her the documents that proved her statement of legal guardianship via last will, and one where she had been granted said guardianship by the town of Kuo. After the director went through the documents, she returned them to the nun, only to leave and return with Issei several minutes later, suitcase in her hands. "Issei, meet your new guardian," Griselda Corda the director said. Issei's facial features went from puzzle to a face that was processing who she was. It all clicked. This was Auntie Griselda, the woman who was with Issei a couple of times. How he hadn't remembered her made him think a bit, but he quickly dismissed it as he hugged her, crying as she carried him. "They're gone, Griselda," he says, crying into her chest, with the nun frowning. "I know, Issei, but don't worry, we'll be alright, I promise," she says, as she left the building with the suitcase in her other hand. Slightly shocked, the director saw how Griselda carried the child with one arm and didn't struggle to grab and carry the suitcase as she lowered herself enough to get it. After entering a dark alley, the two teleported without the child being aware. First heaven. "Issei, do you want to see a magic trick?" Griselda asks her as Issei went from sad to dizzy as the effects of teleportation sunk in. "Yeah," he says before she kissed his forehead, making the dizziness vanish as if it were nothing. Setting him on the ground, he looked at the environment around him. A place of white and gold, with several angels looking at them as the two arrived. Not feeling any holy elements from him, they looked in doubt before a male angel got close. "Griselda, why did you bring a human to heaven?" he asked. "That is a matter I would like to discuss with my queen. Would you know where I could find her?" she asks, holding Issei's hand now that he was on the ground standing up. "She's in Eden, I'll keep an eye on him," a second male said, getting close to them as well. Also a green-eyed blonde person, this man had a smile on him before Griselda glared at him. Knowing the meaning of said glare, he now had a serious face, only to be quickly replaced by a soft smile as he went over to a sofa and patted a spot beside him, inviting the boy to join him. Trusting the smile Griselda was giving him, he proceeded to sit next to this man. "Issei, I'll be back, Dulio here will take care of you while I'm absent, okay?" she asks, kissing his forehead. "Yes, Auntie Griselda," Issei answered, smiling softly before she took his suitcase. "I will take this to my room on my way with my superior, okay?" she asked. All she got was a smile from him before he vanished. A few seconds passed before Issei asked. "Are we in heaven?" The man who was now identified as Dulio began to laugh, along with a few angels. Garden of Eden, fourth heaven. The beautiful blonde woman was seated on the grass, enjoying the silence the garden had to offer. Due to the amount of work she had as a seraph, the times where she could enjoy these kind of moments was rare, and she was enjoying every second of it. However, as all good things, it came to an end when she heard a teleportation sound. "Griselda, what brings you here?" the woman asked, not bothering to turn around. "Lady Gabriel, I have come to make a request, as well as inform you of something," Griselda answered, only for the woman to look at her once the former exorcist was in her sight. "And that would be?" Gabriel asked, a soft smile on her face. "Due to an unexpected chain of events, I have become the legal guardian of a human child, and I wish for him to reside here," she says. "As much as I would like for this child to stay here, I am afraid he is not allowed to stay here," the seraph answers, frowning slightly. "Aside from being his guardian, I have two other reasons for him to stay. The first is due to the unknown sacred gear residing within him. I know he has one, but the question is which. Valuable as it may turn out to be, I still doubt that the other seraphs would allow him to reside here," Gabriel said, standing up. "There is still one more reason. I left his suitcase in my room and unpacked his belongings. I found an item wrapped around my former cloak, and what the item was shocked me when I touched it." "What is the item?" the king asked. "I think it's better if I show you," the queen answered, pulling out the dagger Issei was holding back at the orphanage. This left a shocked expression on her king, only for the seraph to quickly grab it. A red flame quickly erupted from the hilt, quickly making a fiery sword. "The flaming sword," she said, still processing what happened. "The legendary sword given to Lucifer to stand guard at the entrance of the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve sinned?" Griselda asked. "The one and only. How did he acquire the sword?" Gabriel asked, slowly returning the sword to its dagger form. "I honestly do not know, but I do know this. His parents were killed, they did not bother hunting down the child when they did not sense him. I did a quick memory scan, Milady. Judging by his memories, the assassins were most likely after something. If they were your average killers, then the neighbors would have most likely arrived earlier to try and stop the commotion, meaning that they were after someone or something. In this case, the sword and maybe even the child. Now that I know this, I will try and convince my fellow seraphs to allow the child to reside in heaven with you. This may take quite a bit, so I suggest that you follow me over to sixth heaven," Gabriel says, as the two left the garden. Several hours later. Issei was currently asleep, resting his head on Dulio's lap as Michael, Uriel, Gabriel and Raphael entered alongside Griselda. The other angels took a knee, only to rise when Michael, leader of the angels, told them to do so. The four looked at him curiously. "This is the child who had the sword?" another man asked, who went by Uriel. "Indeed, we suspect that the assassins were fallen," Griselda said, ruffling his hair. "Leaving him in the orphanage once more would be disastrous. Several of our followers would be annoyed and lose faith if we kept the sword but sent him back, aware of the fact that they were willing to kill him to get to the sword. If word got out that the child was alone, they would kill him as to avoid any loose ends," Raphael said, taking Gabriel's and Griselda's side. "I will try and awaken his sacred gear, for the sake of another perspective," Michael said. "I deem that unnecessary," Michael, a voice said, one which shocked several of the angels. Kuo Orphanage, Kuo Town. A woman in a police outfit arrived at the orphanage. Short-sleeved shirt, stab vest, a skirt that reached just above her knees and black high heels to finish off the look. She knocked on the door, awaiting an answer. A few seconds later, the director opened the door. "Good evening, ma'am. Are you in custody of Issei Haidu?" the police asked. "Not anymore, he was adopted a few days ago." "What for?" the director asked in return. "I just wanted to ask him some questions concerning the death of his parents a few days ago. Also, could you please give me the description of the person or people who adopted him?" "Yes. Blonde hair, green eyes, dressed in a nun outfit, called herself Griselda. Should I be worried about her?" "Not at all, do have a nice day," the officer said before leaving. As she walked down the street, she began to dial her phone, the ringing being heard before someone answered. "How did it go?" the voice answered. "It went slightly better than expected," the officer answered. "The boy? Currently in the hands of Griselda Quarta, given the description and name. Better with her than dead. Not that I think she is terrible, but with the rumors of rogue elements among our ranks, his death worried me due to our suspicions. What is the next step?" "Ask around for anything we can know about him, Calwerner. I must go, Volley's becoming impatient," the voice said before hanging up. Looking at the time, the now identified Calwerner headed for the school Issei used to attend, hoping to get a lead. First heaven, continuing from the ending of the prologue. "Albion," Michael said, as Issei's eyes opened, said eyes becoming an eerie blue. "Yes, it is I. My heaven hasn't changed much," the white dragon said. "And neither have you. I assume you will try and fight your rival in this useless conflict? Raphael asked, crossing his arms. Tempting, but I can't do so right now. Anyways, my host will eventually face the Red One, for it is our destiny. Albion said. Ugh, get some new material, Dulio said, looking at the child. Who are you to judge me? Albion asked. Someone who didn't get themselves killed due to a rivalry, he answers, earning a silence from the dragon. I don't expect you to understand. Point is, Issei will be hunted down for his sacred gear and or the sword Lucifer once wielded. I offer a deal of a lifetime. Well, at least his lifetime. In exchange of our servitude, Issei shall reside in heaven and be trained by you. I know you will not refuse. A boy like him could be recruited easily, either by invitation or by force. Devils would kill to earn the power their former leader once had, and the Fallen has a gear-loving leader who already has the Red Dragon Emperor under his tutelage. How does the saying go? Ah yes, what is worse than a dragon? Two united and against you, especially if it's the two that required the strength of the three factions to put an end to them. Pondering what is Seraph's disgust and the other disadvantages of refusing, Albion added, Michael and the others brought out their respective decks. I, Michael, leader of heaven, shall accept Issei within our ranks. Now, what card would suit you? He asked, going through the deck, only for Gabriel to get close to him, card in hand before she slowly put it on the child's chest. After quickly absorbing it, she smiled, carrying him. My fellow seraphs and angels, I welcome you all. Heaven's second joker, Gabriel said, smiling softly as the others looked at him. If not much is needed, I will take my joker to his new room, next to mine so he can be close, she says, smiling softly as she left with him. Are you sure it was wise to let him join us? Uriel asked. But those arguments, how could I refuse? That aside, I had a gut feeling, as people would say, Michael answered. And what was this gut feeling? That he will change heaven for the better. Let's hope so, my brother. Let's hope so. Bergori headquarters, Underworld. Alwerner, still in her police attire, entered Azazel's office. The cadre stopped whatever work he was doing to attend his priority. The child. How did your investigation go? Azazel asked, smiling. Not so well, master. Issei is in Gabriel's hands according to an old friend, Alwerner answered. Would this old friend be Raphael? He asked, smirking. Yes. He was always a softie, opting for Gabriel's methods. He did understand why we left. True. Aside from having the divine dividing, she said, with this capturing his interest as if he won the lottery. He has the flaming sword, she answered after seeing him return from his high. Her second part, however, brought mixed emotions upon her superior. Fear, curiosity, among others. That explains everything. Being the host of Albion would most likely be a reason to kill the child, but going after him for the sword. It all makes sense. A weapon deadly to devils, and maybe even the angels and us fallen. Azazel, what do we do now? She asked, worried due to the fact that he still was in a slight shock. We do nothing for now. Something too rash may trigger one of the enemy factions, and another war is the last thing we need right now. That, and the rogue fallen among us discovering what we know would only make matters worse. Tell Barakiel and Shemhazai to swing by. We need to have a thorough talk concerning the recent chain of events, he said, before the female fallen nodded and left. Little did he know what this emergency reunion would cause, leaving a splintered family in the wake. Gabriel's room, hearts building, first heaven. As she watched Issei sleep, Gabriel smiled softly. Aside from having a joker, she had a child of sorts. While adopted by Griselda, she was his mentor and she was looking forward to it, and a smile was adorning her face. However, her smile quickly faded after she saw him fidgeting in his sleep, only to wake up several seconds later. Issei, what happened? She asked, before the child hugged her quickly. I saw them, I saw how my parents died again. He says, crying into her shoulder. Hey, it's okay. Ice, may I call you that? She asked. Yes, he says, now resting on the edge of the bed. Okay, Ice, how about you sleep with me in my room? She asks, before he nodded. Carrying him in her arms, the two left the room, only to enter hers. Tucking him into bed, Gabriel quickly stripped herself, only to get into her nightgown, a silver one made of the finest silk one could ever imagine, showing that her beauty was unrivaled in heaven, regardless of her choice of attire. Heading into bed with him, she wrapped an arm around him, pressing his back against her chest before she fell asleep. Issei's dreamscape. Our young protagonist was in heaven, only for that to quickly vanish as he ended up in a hellish throne room with 4 thrones, each with their minor differences. Hello, is somebody here? He asked, looking around and grabbing the dagger from his coat pocket. There's no point in pointing that sword at me, child, a male voice said. The child turned around, only to see a handsome man. Designer beard, pitch black hair and matching eyes, and dressed in a dark suit to finish off the look, he sat on the throne on the middle left. Why do you say that? Issei asked, putting the dagger in one of his coat pockets and leaving the handle out, only for the man to stretch out his arm, spawning the dagger as if it were nothing. Because I am the first to use it, the man answers, smirking as he made the fire spawn on the dagger, making the flaming sword enter its well-known form before two bat wings appeared behind his back. Who are you? Me? I am Lucifer Morningstar, and we need to have a talk concerning my sister, he answered, a devilish smirk on his face. Issei's dreamscape. The Lucifer? Issei asked, stepping back as the man still had his devilish smirk. Indeed. Now, let us get to the reason why I appeared in your dreamscape of all places, the man said, making the sword go into its dagger form as he twirled it with relative ease. You see, when I was alive, I loved my brothers and sisters greatly, spending a considerable amount of time with them when I was not guarding heaven. But for some reason, my father thought it was a great idea to send me to hell in order to make sure someone was running it. And to make matters worse, the fallen begin to exist. Not that I mind, I have a few friends there, Lucifer said, before continuing. Anyways, the Great War happens, and all hell breaks loose, figurative sense. Wait, what's the Great War? Issei asked. Ugh, to believe I have to explain this to you. Might as well copy-paste the explanation that Gremory Girl gave in one of the many fanfictions these sick degenerates have written where you are resurrected by her, Lucifer said, looking up. Wait, what? In a nutshell, heaven which has the angels, Gregory which has fallen angels and underworld which has the devils got in a big war. God dies, I die along with the three Mau, and several other deaths, he says, going on, trying to make the kid forget what he just heard. What are the fallen? Issei asked, sitting on the ground. Angels who fell due to sin. Those crows believe they are all that just because they can still manipulate light magic. If I were alive, I would show the newer generations the blatant lie they have made themselves believe. If you're dead, why are you here talking to me? Well, I had to cash in a favor when I caught wind of a boy who was recruited by my sister, only for said kid to develop a small crush on her. Well, it may be small, a crush is a crush, and I must interfere as the good older brother I am, he said, earning a blush from Issei upon mentioning the word crush. Now, the only thing I ask of you is to take care of my sister and protect her as she would protect you. As for the favor, there is someone I must introduce you to, Lucifer says, waving a hand at a woman who walked in. Dressed in a dress of purple and black, slim enough to show off her figure despite hardly showing any skin, her skin a ghostly white, almost skeletal, and black features around her eyes and mouth. Issei, say hello to Lady Death. Lady Death, Issei. Oh, and there is no need to worry, her touch is lethal, only if she wants for it to be lethal, he says, as the woman took a knee and hugged the boy as he stood up and wrapped his arms around her. Now Issei, I need you to do the following for me, she said, smiling softly. Yes. You must not tell anyone of my existence, and in exchange, I will let two people visit you, and I am sure you know who, understood? She asked, ruffling his hair gently. Yes, Lady Death, he said, looking into her eyes. You will not mention anything involving this encounter unless Lucifer wishes to send a message, and if he does, you will only give that message to the desired person, she added, kissing his forehead. Okay, he said, only for a black portal to appear behind her, two people walking out of it. Those people were the ones he easily recognized. Mom, Dad. The child said, running at them, arms open as the two hugged him. Issei, we missed you. But his father said, looking at him. We need to tell you something, and you have to pay attention, his mother said, slight sorrow in her voice as she got up and walked away from him, giving her son and husband some distance. Son, I want you to grow up and find a nice woman to spend your life with, okay? He asks, handing Issei a gold coin that was attached to a string, putting it around his neck. Now, your mother wants to talk to you before we leave, Mr. Haidu said, getting up and standing beside the two supernatural beings. Issei, remember what I said about second chances? Mrs. Haidu asked. Yes, Mom, he answered, looking at her. I was informed by Lucifer about the trouble you might face in the future. Remember that everyone deserves a second chance. There might be moments where killing may seem like the best solution, but it is never the best one. There is always a better way, trust me, she said, tears running down her eyes, causing him to cry as she wrapped her arms around him. I say this so you can be better. Go out there and make the world a better place, my son. I know you can do it, she added, handing him a photo of the three of them. We must go, Issei, I don't think we'll be able to see you again. Take care, stay safe and make us proud, she ended, before letting go of her son as she goes over to her husband. He tried to run to his parents, only for Lucifer to stop him. His smile was gone, and on his face was sorrow. Lady Death also frowned, seeing how the child didn't really have anyone that could be considered family except for Griselda. Watching the two cross the portal and said portal closing behind the deceased couple, the current White Dragon Emperor slowly stopped crying a few minutes later, his eyes now puffy. Ruffling his hair, the former ruler of the underworld looked down at Issei. Issei, before I leave as well, I ask of you to do something for me. Grow up, be the one Gabriel needs, and protect her, succeed where I couldn't, he said, giving the child a sad smile. Yes, Lucifer, Issei said, as death opened a second portal for them, the bringer of light, standing alongside the pale woman. Oh, and give this to her, tell her it's a gift from me, and that she should keep it somewhere safe. I mean, we all have our trademark item, and all, like she has those weird heart-shaped bangs, don't know how she does that, he says, flipping a coin with such skill that the child caught it. He looked at the coin, which had Jesus crucified on one side in a triangle, while the other side had a goat's head in a pentagram. Okay, Lucifer. He says, smiling softly before the couple vanished into a portal. A while later, things became blurry, and everything went black. Gabriel's room, hearts building, first heaven. The infant was woken up by his king, who had a worried look on her face. Issei, are you alright? She asked, seeing his face with dried tears and his hand holding something she could not see. Yes, somebody wanted to give you something, she said, putting the item in her hand. She looked at the item and her eyes widened. Lucy's Pentecostal coin, she said, holding it tightly. So that's what it is. He said something about keeping it safe, he said, which made the Seraph put it on the bedside table before wrapping her arms around him. Come on, Issei, we need to go to bed, Griselda's taking you to the Vatican tomorrow to meet someone before we begin your training, Gabriel said, ruffling his hair. Yes, my king, he said, looking into her eyes, earning a deadpan expression from her. Did Lucifer tell you to tell me that? She asked. No. He asked, only to be tickled by her, making him laugh. Now Issei, you will address us as if we were friends. No formalities are needed here, okay? She asked, the bright smile that could easily brighten anyone's day present. Okay, he said, catching his breath after she stopped, now smiling with her. Good, now let's go back to sleep, she said, gently pressing his back in bed against her chest as the two slowly fell asleep, finding comfort in each other's warmth. Fifth heaven. Michael was doubtful of the folder's contents. Well, the idea was good, he just wasn't feeling right about it. I know that look, Raphael said, looking at his brother. The thing is this program. The method and other details are convincing, but something is odd, the leader of heaven answered. And that would be. The Seraph's answer was none other than having the folder placed in his hands, now being able to check the contents. After checking them for several minutes, he gave his brother an answer. I, as a Seraph and your brother, suggest that you do what you think is right, and if you think this will help us greatly, then let them continue. Now finish up here and rest, we should call it a day, Raphael answered, before leaving. Grabbing a seal and stamping it on the folder's cover, he put it in his archive in the H section, deciding to investigate tomorrow and personally deliver it to an old friend of his. Unknown location. Several years later. The blonde child stood among several bodies, holding on to his life. While he was not bleeding out or under the effects of poisoning, he risked being killed. As he tried to get up, a child who was covered by several bodies that was on the other side of the room, put his index finger against his mouth. SHHHH, the second child said, motioning the first child to remain quiet, which he did. Do what I say, and we can avenge this massacre, he added, motioning the boy to stay in place. Several minutes passed as several sounds were heard, meaning that most, if not all, of the murderers had left. A considerable amount of time passed before the second child pushed the bodies off of him, watching how the first had gotten up with ease. Isaiah, I'm glad you survived, the second child said, wrapping his arms around the first. Yeah, though they didn't, Isaiah said, pointing at their fallen brothers and sisters. Yes, the time of revenge will come later. Now, let's give them a proper burial, the unknown child said, slowly dragging out the bodies one by one. It had been hours before the bodies were all buried, around 20 being the ones that were left behind. Come and think about it, what's your name? Isaiah asked, looking at the other child, only to earn a laugh. Well, my name is Victor. The Vatican. The day after Issei's dream, 7 years before the canon timeline. Griselda, what are we going to do today? Issei asked, wrapping his arms around his aunt as the two made their way to the Vatican. Well, Issei, we are going to visit the Vatican as I promised. But, you will also meet someone special, my pupil so to say, Griselda answered, kissing his forehead as they kept on walking down the busy streets of one of the most well-known places the world had to offer. It had been minutes before the two arrived at their destination, reaching a majestic building. Aside from the insane amount of tourists and religious followers, the building was well known due to its structure, beautiful paintings on the ceilings, and also home to the Pope. Good morning, Sister Griselda, a priest said. Not much was relevant concerning his appearance, aside from the fact that he looked like he was in his 50s. Good morning, Father Petrenko, she replied, smiling softly, something that had been rarely seen on her. What brings you here today? By the looks of it you have another motive, the elderly priest said, returning a smile. Well, it is a visit along with a personal delivery, she said, giving him a knowing look. After understanding the importance of the delivery, he stood aside, letting her enter a section of the Vatican. After walking down a long hallway, the two reached what seemed like a minor copy of First Heaven. Several buildings that were used for residence, others for training, and a few for the basic necessities such as eating and bathing. Upon entering, the exorcists took a knee, only for them to rise quickly once Griselda gave them the order. Are you going to do this every time I come? She asked, clearly annoyed. Yes, Sister Griselda. They shouted, laughing before the former nun began to laugh as well. During her days as an exorcist, she had climbed up the ranks rather quickly, being on par with the most experienced ones. This led to her being recruited by the angels, an offer she instantly accepted. However, despite the amount of time she told her former colleagues to stop taking a knee when she arrived, they didn't agree. Whether it was out of habit or to get on her nerves, Griselda was hoping it wasn't the latter. Could somebody escort me to Father Rowe? I am afraid I do not know of his current whereabouts. I'll do it. An energetic voice said, running up to her. A girl of around Issei's age ran up to him. Average complex and blue hair with a green streak, this girl was hopping in place, looking at Griselda. Oh, you must be Zenobia Mai, I have heard many things about you, Griselda said, putting Issei down. Yes, I am Zenobia Quarta, your new pupil, she said, slightly awkward. It had been a surprise she had been registered with Griselda's last name by the church, especially when they hadn't even seen each other. That quickly passed as Griselda stood up, holding Issei's hand. There will be plenty of time later, I must deliver something before taking Issei back, she says, looking at Zenobia. But Sister Griselda, why can't it be now? Zenobia asked, whining. Because this is very important, she said, emphasis on the importance, making Zenobia behave. The former exorcist hadn't been given the title of Heavenly Mother for no good reason. With those who were under her command she behaved like a mother, making sure they were loved and well behaved. But, as it happens with all mothers, there were few who decided to test her patience and tolerance. So when it came to people they feared from the three factions, many shivered upon hearing the name Griselda Quarta. All the child said, pouting before she guided the angels to the location of Father Rowe, current leader of their branch. The man was far older than Father Petrenko, clearly 10 or 20 years older. White hair and a cane with holy markings in his hands, the elderly man sat in his chair, awaiting their arrival. Sisters Quarta, it is nice to have you here, and I see you have a guest, Father Rowe said. Zenobia, you may leave, but before that, do you wish to let Zenobia keep our guest company? He asked, looking at the Queen of Hearts. Not at all, I also came to let you meet him, she replied, signaling her pupil to leave. Once she left, the father spoke up. Who is the child? Issei Haidu, hardly any antecedents involving the church, but with enough power to be the second joker, she said, as Issei sat in her lap. Now having a good look at him, the father continued. Issei Haidu, name of Japanese origins when he comes of age, we will have to take him to the Yokai or Shinto faction. With their approval, there would not be much the local fallen or devils could do where one of those situations came up, for the word of the Japanese mythologies trumps those of the other two factions in the situation where he must head home. Wise as ever, Griselda complimented, earning a smile from him. I have lead this sector quite nicely for the past 30 years, little Griselda, he said, chuckling as he remembered the time he saw her as a child, growing up quickly and leaving the Vatican to join her heavenly comrades. Now, what makes him special? He asked, now looking at Issei. Issei dear, would you mind standing up and showing him your wings? She asked, earning a nod from the child. Now standing up, the child extended his wings. Instead of seeing angel wings, the row saw two white and blue wings, and it clicked. You recruited this generation's white dragon emperor? Outstanding, he said, genuine surprise in his voice. My king did, and most of heaven has taken a liking to him. They have begun to say that he will do great things in the future, given the proper training and education, she said, signaling Issei to despawn the wings. There is also something else heaven has yet to decide on who to inform, for this item is currently under investigation, she said, smiling as she got up. On your way already? He asked, smiling and getting up with the help of his cane. Yes, Father Rowe, she answered, holding Issei's hand. How about a final walk around, for old time's sake? He asked, making his way towards them. How could I refuse? This said, the three left, walking around the Vatican and its streets. Those who knew enough of them didn't see a man in his third age walking with an adult and a child. What they saw was a man and his daughter, said people now a grandfather and mother respectively. Of all the people who could have been assigned to take care of Griselda, it was he who decided to ensure her growth, and he was proud of the results. However, something had caught Griselda's attention. Griselda, I plan on retiring in a few years. I am well aware of the fact that I have lead the Vatican branch quite well, But I feel as if the time to pass on the responsibility is coming soon. I do not wish to do it now, for the child is 10 years old given the basic information. That is why I want you to lead it when I retire. I am quite sure you will manage to find a way to visit your nephew, at least once a week, he says, smiling sadly as he struggled to walk, something the former exorcist helped him with. Maybe the time to use a wheelchair is coming, my daughter, he says, a tear running down his face as Griselda stopped holding Issei's hand, only to give her former mentor and father a hug, which earned several tears from her as well. He had watched her grow up and she knew it, but what she hated at the time was watching how he was slowly making his way to his deathbed. However, she would cherish every moment she could spend with him before he died and honor his memory by running the Vatican. We should return, we spent a considerable amount of time walking, and it is evident he is tired, Father Rose said, looking at Issei who was yawning a bit and rubbing his eyes. Yes, father, she said, before leaving him at the Vatican and taking her nephew to heaven once more. Lucifer residence, Lucifid, underworld. A few days later. The man who looked like he was in his third age saw the pictures, thinking on how a child of all people had acquired the blade that was rightfully his father's. This enraged him to no end, blaming the angels for stealing it, but then again, it had been taken from his father, once he no longer needed to guard Eden. However, what shocked him next was the footage concerning the crime scene. As prideful as he may be, he still had his ethics, and said ethics involved not harming civilians, unless the situation was required. Master, is everything alright? A silver-haired man asked. This blue-eyed man was dressed in a suit, looking at him as he set the whiskey and 2 glasses on the desk. Serve us a glass each, Euclid, this may take a while, the old man said, as the servant complied. Drinking from his glass, the elder continued. The flaming sword has been found, he said, making his servant choke. You're supposed to enjoy the beverage, not choke on it, he added, in a scolding tone. I apologize greatly, not anyone can remain stoic upon hearing someone mention relevant news concerning the sword that cut through dimensions, Euclid said, looking at him. Fair enough, and also stop addressing me as master, it's gotten pretty old, the elder said, holding his glass out, which the servant refilled. Yes, Rizavam. Also, what will we do concerning your granddaughter? He asked, looking at the man before his face had become one of slight sorrow. He had usually seen joy and rage on Rizavam's face, but a hint of sorrow was uncommon. Let her be, I'm quite sure she's in better hands, he says, sighing. Still, the flaming sword returning is more than enough to rethink what happens next. A part of me says to continue with the preparations for the rebellion, no matter how much time it may take for us to begin said rebellion. The other half seeks answers concerning the blade, what my father may want. Swords like the Excaliburs are usually handed out like textbooks, but other blades and items such as the sacred gears and weapons of Ascalon's caliber or higher usually choose their wielders, Rizavam said, finishing his drink. Have you tried telling the other descendants? He asked. You know how they can be, thinking with their hurt pride instead of their brains, Rizavam said. What about her? Euclid asked. She could be worth a shot. Could you please bring her? He asked, which earned a small smile from Euclid. It would be my pleasure, the servant said, before writing a quick letter and sending it via magic circle. Several minutes passed before a beautiful woman appeared. Voluptuous body, black hair and matching lipstick along with a dress that hugged her figure. There was a cut that showed some cleavage, said cut being held together by several strips that made an X pattern. Rizavam, why did you call me? She asked, clearly annoyed. Business. Euclid, please bring her favorite drink so she can be in a good mood, Rizavam answered, laughing as the member of the Lucifuge family quickly left. I hate that child, she said. Yet he loves you, he says, teasing. Ugh, now why did you ask for me to come? She asked. There is a certain child whose parents were killed for a sword, the Lucifer descendants said. What, another one had their parents killed for another Excalibur? She said. No, not at all. This time, it's a bigger fish, he answered, a wide grin adorning his face, only for it to become a small smile once Euclid returned, giving her an odd beverage before standing beside Rizavam. Served in a wine glass, this beverage was blood red, with several black swirls moving in it. I still do not understand how you can drink that without any repercussions, the kids have yet to finish an entire glass. That's what those petulant descendants get, the unknown woman said, drinking from her glass. Now what was this sword you were talking about? Well, you are aware of the swords heaven has created, right? He asked, shaking his glass a bit showing that he wanted more. Yes. The dime a dozen swords aren't of my interest, and Ascalon is one that is tempting. Question is, which sword was the one that required my presence? She asked. As I told Euclid before, it is the flaming sword, the one your brother used, he answered, making the unknown woman set her glass on the desk. Let me get this straight. Lucy's sword is in the hands of a child. She asked, rage evident, but not at an alarming rate. Yes, but it is actually in heaven. His aunt was Griselda Quarta and she adopted him after his parents were murdered by fallen angels. Please do not be mad, I beg you. The descendant of Lucifer said, getting on his knees, only to earn a small smirk from her. Oh, is little Ivan scared of his aunt? She asked, a malefic smirk on her face as she flared her power enough to scare him, but not alarm any other supernatural beings that were nearby. Yes, Aunt Lilith, he said, looking down. Now my nephew, you will do as I say. I want all the information you can gather of the child at my home tomorrow, as well as any updates you may have in the future being delivered right after said updates have been confirmed. Also, I do not want any devils on your side to go after him, understood? She asked, patting his head. Yes, Aunt Lilith, he said. Good. I shall take my leave, maybe mess with that cute servant of yours, she added, grabbing a blushing Euclid by his tie, before dragging him out of the room. Oh Lucy, you and I will be together again, Lilith thought, a soft smile on his face. Hearts building, first heaven. 2 years later. Time had passed in the world, an array of changes in heaven as well. Griselda had left heaven a few months ago, maintaining her role as the Queen of Hearts, but also acquiring the role of leader of the Vatican after her adoptive father died in his sleep. Dulio and Issei had become the best of friends and he had grown a few dragon fruit trees. Yes, the trees had grown nicely in the Garden of Eden, a new sector for dragons added, but what of our protagonist? Now an angel in his early teens, he had a growth spurt and had yet to reach his maximum height. Going from cute to handsome, he had caught the eye of plenty a girl his age, not only for his looks, but also for his kind personality. But as it sometimes happens, his childhood crush became a sense of admiration and slight love for his Seraph. With a box of dragon fruit and a sheathed flaming sword in his pocket dimension, he made his way toward the forest little to no angels had a reason of going to. Familiar forest, underworld. Hello, my name is Atuji. How may I help, the guide asked, only to stop upon realizing the teen in front of him was an angel. Well, I'm looking for Tiamat and concerning the faction I belong to. This is a business issue, dragon to dragon, he said, spawning his sacred gear. I see. Are you sure you want to visit her? The man asked. Yes, I wish to talk to her, Issei answered. Well, just follow this map and you will find her in half an hour or so, Zatuji said. Take into account I will not be held responsible for your death should it happen. It's okay, I'm not much of a shoot before ask type of person, he said, smiling brightly before leaving. 30 minutes later. In all these years, Tiamat, the Chaos Karma Dragon, was not prepared for whatever happened. Blue scales, matching eyes and an intimidating presence, she was greatly feared by dragons and familiars. The sole female Dragon King had slaughtered numerous hosts of both Drag and Albion, but she hadn't expected this approach from one of their hosts. Tiamat, I've come to bargain. Issei's room, Hearts building, first heaven. 6 years before the canon timeline, present day. So Issei, how did you get the dragon fruit? Dulio asked, as the two enjoyed a light breakfast. Well, it all began one time when Griselda took me to Egypt, Issei said, drifting off as he remembered the events that happened that day. Somewhere in Egypt. 7 years before the canon timeline, a year before Tiamat's bargain. The child was playing with some Egyptians that were of his age, give or take a couple of years. However, he was approached by an odd man who with his presence scared the other kids away. Hair that was the color of purple wine, dressed in a black tank top and some jeans with some combat boots, the man held something. Hey kid, you want some fruit? He asked, a big grin on his face. Hannon, stop trying to scare my host, Albion said all of a sudden. Well, if it isn't Albion, the man, now identified as Tannen, said. Who are you? Issei asked, looking at the man. Oh, sorry for that. Well, I'm Tannen the Blaze Meteor Dragon, nice to meet you, he says, shaking Issei's hand with his free hand. I'm Issei Haidu, the White Dragon Emperor. Issei said with childish glee. Well Issei, I have a surprise for you. This is dragon fruit, a special kind of fruit some dragons require for survival. Normally I would deliver some to Apophis, but he didn't bother coming today, said something about a trial concerning Horus, Tannen said. Oh, Issei said. The point is, I was wondering if you could plant this somewhere in heaven. That way, you can have a snack of sorts, use it as leverage with other dragons. Don't give my partner ideas, Albion said. I don't see you complaining. You may not like the suggestions of the fruit as a bargaining chips, but I am quite sure you've missed the taste of a ripe dragon fruit, haven't you? Tannen asked, smirking. 3, 2, 1 Tannen thought, before the deceased dragon caved in. Yes, Albion admitted in defeat. Now that wasn't so difficult, huh? So what do you say, kid, want to help a dragon out? He asked. Sure. The child asked, before the man handed him the fruit. Good. Now, I must get going, that exorcist is coming my way. See you around, kid. Tannen said, before quickly vanishing. Issei, what happened? Griselda asked, running up to him. "This man called Tannen gave me a fruit," he said, showing the fruit to her. "Tannen came for Issei, why?" the Queen of Hearts thought before the two quickly left Egypt. "Familiar forest." "What?" the Dragon King asked, looking down at him. "Yeah, I said I wanted to bargain," Issei answered, crossing his legs and sitting on the ground. "And what makes me think I should let you walk away alive, she asked, bringing a fist down and slamming it beside him. "You missed on purpose, which means that you don't have a good reason to kill me yet," he says, bringing out a bottle of water and drinking from it. "You're right, I'll give you that. What's your name?" she asked. "Issei Haidu, and given the information I was provided, you are Tiamat the Chaos Karma Dragon," he said, enthusiasm in his voice. "Nice to meet you," she said. "What is this bargain you told me about when you arrived?" she asked, getting closer, a few feet away from him. "Well, after proper care I managed to grow some fruit to the degree that I could share a basket with you," he says, pulling out a sealed box and a basket. The Dragoness raised an eyebrow at this, only for the teen to pull out several fruits rather quickly and put them in the basket before making the box vanish. "How did you get this?" Tiamat asked, using a claw to carry the basket by its handle, looking at the contents. "The man gave me a fruit," he answered, putting the bottle aside and looking up at her. "And who would this man be?" "Tannen," he answered. "How did you make him give you the fruit?" "I don't know, I was in Egypt visiting with my aunt before I was approached by him," he says, spawning a knife made of light and twirling it. "And who is your aunt?" she asked, putting the basket aside. "It's not in my place to say her name unless the person I am talking to is one I can trust. I trust you, but not enough to spill the beans on who's close to me." "Fair enough. You gave me the fruit for the bargain you've yet to talk about. What do you seek from me?" "Well, I was wondering if you could train me." "For what purpose?" she asked. People usually came to challenge her, but to seek her guidance in combat was something rare. How long had it been since someone had asked her if she could train them? "Well, Tannen suggested that I train with you, said something about not being able to train me himself due to the current situation involving the three factions," he answered, laughing nervously. "Are you scared?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Sort of. I was alright until we reached this point. If I'm not wrong, you're going to ask me what abilities I have," he said, looking away. "You guessed correctly, now look at me, child. What abilities do you have?" she asked, pressing him, earning an answer shortly after she asked. "I am the White Dragon Emperor," he said, now looking at her, fear written on his face. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Issei thought, as the legendary dragon showed no emotion. "What do you plan on doing concerning the Red Dragon Emperor?" she asked, looking at him. His fear washing away due to the outcome, Issei stood up and spoke. "Well, I don't know him or her, so there isn't much I should do. I mean, I asked Albion several times after he began bragging about his powers and rivalry, but he never mentioned why they became rivals. I rarely speak to him nowadays. I guess it was after the day he and I spoke about his rivalry for the last time." "Let me guess. He got annoyed because you didn't want to continue this rivalry?" she asked, receiving a nod from him. "Also, do you mind if I turn into my human form? Eating the dragon fruit in this form would be a waste, I'd rather enjoy it." "Not at all, I can also prepare the fruit for you if you want to," he says, watching how a bright blue light enveloped Tiamat, leaving a woman sitting on the ground in front of him. Long, pale blue hair that reached the ground, dark blue eyes that seemed to look into one's soul, yet have a certain mysterious influence, and a beauty that was near incomparable. This woman was dressed in a plain blue dress that reached the ground, her legs crossed as she handed a fruit over to him. He spawned a small box and made the light knife vanish, taking out a knife from the box, along with a plate and a small bottle of chili powder. He then began cutting the fruit into slices and putting said slices on the plate before applying the powder onto said slices, handing her the plate once finished. She tried a slice, surprised at this. How could something sweet be mixed with something spicy? It just fit so well, she needed more. In an unladylike fashion, she ate the remaining slices, finishing them in a couple of minutes. Say, are you busy today?" she asked, giving the plate back to him. "Not at all, why?" he asked, curiosity evident. "Could you please make more of these snacks?" she asked, a look on her face he was more than familiar with. The look of craving in the sense of food. He had seen it plenty of times on Dulio's face, occasionally on Gabriel's as well. It was amusing to see how these powerful beings could be entertained or pleased with such simple things, and he liked it. "I wouldn't mind doing so," he answered, as he brought out more utensils and ingredients. Over the span of a few hours, the two enjoyed an array of snacks involving the dragon fruit, along with several conversation topics. Slices of dragon fruit and cheese on circular crackers as appetizers with a glass of water while they began talking about the basics of each other. The talk about an in-depth basis of their abilities, excluding the flaming sword and some of Tiamat's tricks, was accompanied by an intermission of kebabs prepared on a portable grill and a fruit punch with traces of dragon fruit. This punch is good, where did you get the ingredients? She asked, drinking from her glass. All of the fruits were obtained from my own little corner of the Garden of Eden. I would have used a forbidden fruit, but it's forbidden for a reason, he said, chuckling as they continued eating. The dessert was none other than apple snack stacks, circular slices of apples stacked on each other in small stacks with a hole in the middle, said hole and layers between the slices being filled with peanut butter. That was great, Issei, Tiamat said, smiling as Issei used magic to wash the dishes before making them vanish. You flatter me, Tiamat, Issei said, blushing a bit at the praise. Now, I believe that you wanted me to train you? The dragoness asked, standing up. Yes, Tiamat, he said, now taking a knee. Such humility is refreshing. Shall we begin the familiar process? She asked, smirking. Wait, what? He asked, before standing up. I want to become your familiar. Oh, why though? Well, it's been a while since I've been in the human world and other realms, and I could use some company. I'll train you in whatever draconic skills you may have, so as long as you keep on making those tasty meals of yours, she says. Okay. Wait, how do we do this? He asked, making sure he left nothing lying around. Just hold my hands and let me do all the work, okay? She said, giving him a soft smile. Yes, Tiamat, he said, as the two were covered with a light blue aura. After a few seconds, the aura died out, leaving Issei with an odd light blue mark on the back of his right hand before it faded quickly. What's this? He asked, looking into her eyes, seeing as she also had one. Think of it as a bonding mark, meaning that you are under my care. Normally, it would be the other way around, but given our current power, it is the way it is right now. Now, shall we get going? I want to meet some of these people whose identities you didn't tell me about, she asked, a malefic grin on her face, not of evil intentions, but actually of a desire to see how many she could spook with her introduction. With a quick bright flash, the two left in a cross, leaving the familiar forest with a being less to fear. First heaven. The two arrived and saw several angels raise their guard upon seeing the woman who was with Issei before he gave them his trademark soft smile, which eased their slightly worried minds. Tiamat, however, smirked and flared some of her power, making most of the angels run away before several prepared their weapons and magic. Now Tiamat, that is rude. You should not do that in someone else's home. Come on, I'll show you the Garden of Eden, Issei said, holding her hand before Tiamat stopped flaring her aura. The angels went from scared to wide-eyed, shocked at the fact that the current possessor of divine dividing was able to speak to one of the 5 dragon kings with such ease. While the feat might seem impressive itself on paper, the fact that Haidu did so in such a calm tone that carried no pressure nor was scolding was surprising. With that kind of charisma and power at the age of 12, most residents of heaven thought he was going to go places. Fourth heaven. Gabriel was seated under the tree of knowledge of good and evil, smiling as she held a red apple that was bitten. Her father had used magic to preserve it as a reminder. While his point was curiosity killed the cat, she saw in it satisfaction brought it back as well. She missed Azazel and the others and figured that she might visit them in a time where she could take a proper break, maybe go around the world with her favorite angel. Issei. However, as it happened years ago in a similar situation, her peace was interrupted with an arrival that brought a smile to her face, although said smile was quickly vanishing as the second presence intrigued her. Getting up quickly and tidying herself up, she walked over to her joker and the unknown woman. Ice, who is it you have brought with you today? The Seraph asked, wrapping her arms around him, an action he reciprocated. Oh, this is Tiamat. She's my familiar, he says in a calm tone, charming smile on his face. What, how? Gabriel thought, slight panic before she began to see the pros and cons of this. Wait, this could be beneficial to heaven, she can be a chaperone of sorts if Issei must reside on Eartham, pretty convenient for any future events the writer might have, and that is without taking into account the possible alliance with dragons aside from Albion, but anyways. It is a pleasure to meet you, Tiamat. I am Gabriel, Seraph and also Issei's mentor, she said, wrapping her arms around him so his back would be against her chest. Somebody's protective, or is it clingy? The dragoness thought. Very well, I have a proposition for you. Aside from training him in his draconic skills, I shall take care of him while he resides in Kuo. In exchange, you will earn my favor and in due time with the proper procedures, tannins and the underworld support in case a major threat happens, and I know that you are tired of this uneasy ceasefire, Tiamat said, smirking. How can I refuse? I accept, but Issei will visit me at least once a week, understood? The Seraph asked, hugging him a bit tighter, something he enjoyed. A deal's a deal, you have my word. "Now Issei, show me that corner of Eden you have," she said, pulling him out of Gabriel's grasp before the two left the Seraph. This conversation made the Seraph forget the apple she was holding, only for her to remember quickly as she smiled. Putting the apple in her pocket, she put a hand on the tree and smiled. "Adam, Eve, humanity is indeed a gift," she said, looking at Issei as he walked with his familiar. Former Haidu residence, Kuo Town, Japan. Several months later. The festival, as he called it due to a lack of memory concerning the topic it involved, was something he had looked forward to. He hadn't been to it in a couple of years, yet it was still as lively as ever. Unlike the majestic ones cities like Kyoto offered, this one was small but just as lively, since Kuo was big enough for a festival. He had been to the town fairs in several cities of the United States and Mexico, but none compared to this one. Dressed in a white and blue kimono, our young protagonist was walking alone with a crepe in his hand. He waved at Tiamat, who was dressed in a light blue kimono with a dark blue obi wrapped around her stomach. As one of the planners for this year's festival, she was at a booth, tending to several customers in a fishing game. He met several students he knew from the park, some from the middle school he attended, so on and so forth. However, there was an older girl who struck his interest, one who was alone. Black hair, dressed in a matching kimono and a golden obi, the unknown person was catching her breath, resting her hand on a tree to avoid falling. His protective instincts kicking in, Issei ran over to her. "Hey, is everything alright?" he asked, secretly using his abilities to detect anything strange from her. He felt an unknown element, but he wouldn't press her to talk about it. "Yes, just catching my breath," she said, compassing herself. "You look like you could use something to eat, care for a bite?" "My mother has a steak that is to die for," Issei said, seeing a few unknown beings in the distance heading towards them at a high speed, motioning her to look back. Doing so, she realized the dangers of refusing, and thus began walking with him towards Tiamat's booth. Making their way back to Tiamat's booth was fairly simple, though quiet despite the liveliness of the festival. Issei assumed it was due to these mysterious pursuers, but he would ask her somewhere far more private and at a later time. Some minutes later, they were greeted by the sight of the blue-haired beauty who was taking a break after tending to the customers, a few teenagers covering for her. "Issei, who is this girl?" Tiamat asked in a teasing tone, which made Issei shake his head in a knowing manner. "Oh, I saw her alone and tired next to a tree, looks she was running away from something," Issei said, holding Tiamat's hand. "She's being chased for reasons I don't know, I want to keep her safe." Issei spoke to her via mental link. "Anything suspicious concerning her? For all we know she could be a criminal in one of the other factions, like the Stray Devils and Rogue Fallen." Tiamat answered in his mind. "No mother, I think there's more to this," Ice countered, looking at his mother with pleading eyes. She despised his nature in a way, for he was willing to give the worst of people a second chance. However, he taught her the same, showing her that the users of Albion could offer more than draconic pride, senseless conflict, and the despair Tiamat had once suffered. Looking at him, she gave her answer. "Fine, not like she can do much to us, my son," she spoke in his mind before they broke the link, which resulted in Tiamat bringing him in for a hug, Kuroka looking at the two as they enjoyed the embrace. After what seemed like countless hours, the two broke it, now looking at the female teenager. Now Issei, we should get to know her better," Tiamat said, before the three left the stand, heading for a booth that specialized in serving meals with red meat. Due to their surroundings, they only gave the basics of each other, which were the name, age, occupation, relationships and other minor things. Kuroka, approximately between 13 and 17, was a young shrine maiden who had a younger sister, but the dragon duo knew better. "So this is the Hanami festival?" Issei asked, looking at Kuroka who had a small smile while eating her steak, courtesy of Tiamat's skills. "Yes, it is a festival held to celebrate the blossoming of the sakura trees," the black-haired teen said looking at the two. "I guess all my time away has made me rusty when it comes to traditions here," the angel said, giving her his trademark smile. "This instinct of sorts, a protective one he figures. Still, Shirin's safety is what worries me, I have to check up on her." "But how?" she asked, looking a bit distant, something Tiamat observed. "Ice, why don't you take Kuroka home? You've stayed out long enough and our guest looks like she could use a good rest," Tiamat said, flaring enough of her aura to give her no option but to accept. "Yes mother. See you at home," Issei said, wrapping his arms around her before she wrapped hers around his. A few seconds later the two broke the embrace and parted ways, Kuroka walking alongside Issei. As the duo walked down the empty streets of Kuo, Issei slowly pulled her closer and held her hand. "What's the matter, Kuroka?" Issei asked, briefly looking at her before looking forward again. "It's just something I don't want to talk about, Ice," she answered, looking away. "We can talk about it at home, or maybe some other time, how about that?" "Yeah, I guess," she answered, frowning as the two kept walking, nothing but the silence as their witness. That is until half a dozen beings arrived, all with leathery black wings and malefic smiles. Stray devil Kuroka, we have come to kill you for murdering your master, one said in an arrogant tone. You're a stray? Issei asked Kuroka, receiving a nod from her. Does this have to do with the reason you were running away? He asked, receiving a nod from her once more. It's okay, I'll try and talk with them before we go home, alright? He asked, giving her his trademark smile. Well, on behalf of my superior and the Dragon King Tiamat, I am not allowed to let you take her. And therefore, I suggest we talk instead of fighting to reach an outcome that is beneficial to both of us, Issei said, his choice of words being far more formal. Ahaha, we'll be done with you in no time. One exclaimed before flying towards him and preparing to punch him, only for Issei to intercept this. Well, there goes peace. Then again, arrogance equals defeat, Issei said, spawning his sacred gear. He has a sacred gear? A second devil asked, stepping back a bit as the 6 who were sent to kill Kuroka looked at the white and blue wings. Yes I do. Now, I will repeat myself. Let's sit down and talk things through instead of resorting to violence, Issei said, hovering above the ground. She will come with us, dead or alive. A female devil wearing a green dress said, spawning some magic runes. Then so be it, the angel said, his smile quickly replaced with a frown, as his attire was quickly replaced with a silver armor that had a blue border, with white robes and a mix of blue and gold details on the borders of his robes, along with his hair becoming gold and his eyes green. An angel, one of the devils said. Well, that cat's out of the bag. Being honest, I didn't know she was a stray, but aren't strays said to be humans with a beastly appearance? He asked, making a sort of light. That doesn't matter, what matters is that you're defending this stray. The devil said, before one of them charged at him. Stay back Kuroka, I'll handle them, I said, smiling softly before fighting the devils. He had to dodge several magic blasts and hits, doing so with grace before he appeared in front of the devil who spawned the runes and preparing a light sword, only to do a quick teleport and appear in front of a devil who had a staff. Delivering several slashes to said devil's knees and forcing that devil to kneel before he knocked it out. The third devil fired an orb of energy that Issei deflected by turning his light sword into a bar, hitting the devil who fired it along with another one, leaving 2 left. A 5th devil charged at him, this being a gigantic man of a bit more than 2 meters in height. He swung what looked like a pillar before Issei jumped on it, using the momentum to fall and land in front of the rune devil and flicking her nose with his index finger. Running away from the first devil's reach, he began dodging quick slashes from the 6th devil and blasts from the first one. Give up child, we've won. The devil in the green dress said before Issei appeared near her, the giant swinging at him. You've already lost, he said, walking away with Kuroka as she heard one word. Divide. What? She thought, as she felt weakened, only for the giant to swing at her, sending her against a tree and knocking her unconscious. You feathered prick, you took out our king. The giant said. Not at all, that was your doing, Issei answered, turning to look at him. I realized that your fighting style was strong but predictable. I also realized that you couldn't really stop a swing that easily, so I used this to my advantage to make you swing at me at the right time and also knock her out. The divide would wear her out enough to prevent her from escaping your swing, but now that I've absorbed half her power and only you and the knight are left, shall we continue? He asked, the holy energy from the light bar becoming stronger as it became a sword again. No, we surrender, the knight said, motioning the giant who happened to be a rook to kneel. What are you going to do with us? The giant asked, his anger no longer present. Spare the 6 of you, but the punishment will be up to them, Issei said, pulling out a silver coin and leaving their fates in the hands of the coin toss. It's about time I visit my aunt, Issei said, looking at the Vatican that was on the side of the coin that was face up before making the coin vanish. Using an improvised lasso made of light, he tied the 6 together and held Kuroka's hand, the 8 vanishing in a cross. Griselda Quarta's office, formerly Father Rose, the Vatican. Issei, where are we? Kuroka asked, slightly scared. The Vatican, but don't worry, my aunt and the others are really nice people. Issei said, checking his watch quickly before continuing. 2 minutes and 38 seconds my aunt will come, so let's take a seat, he answered, pulling out a chair for her as the 2 saw the hunters in the corner of the room, having given up. Oh okay, she said, taking a seat before he did. As if he were a fortune teller, Griselda walked in with a soft smile on her face, too soft, which scared Kuroka. Issei, why are there 7 devils in my office? She asked, taking a seat at the desk. Oh, the answer is simple. I became her friend, he answered, a hand open and motioning towards Kuroka who nervously waved before he continued. And so did Tiamat. We were walking home until the 6 devils over there said that she was a stray and that she had to be brought back dead or alive. However, she didn't look like a stray, and given what I have heard of strays, I began to think that maybe there's more to this. I felt no evil from her. So there was a minor fight which I won thanks to your training. I think I was good and I decided to ask you what we should do with the six, he said, giving her a smile which made her shake her head and laugh a bit. Oh Issei, what am I going to do with you? Who is this devil anyways? She asked, only for one of the captured devils to answer, the one in the green dress. That's Kuroka, charged for having killed her master after going mad with Senjutsu, she answered, no hostility in her voice. Well, she looks far from mad, but where are your manners, Issei? You didn't introduce me to them, she said, before getting up and ruffling his hair. Sorry, it's because we went down to business first. Anyways, Kuroka, other devils, this is my aunt, Griselda Quarta. Griselda, stray devil Kuroka and 6 stray hunters, he said, making the 7 devils afraid. It is a pleasure to meet you, Griselda said, before bringing out a sword. Likewise pleasure's ours, hi, the 7 answered, looking at her. Now Issei, what should we do with them? The Queen of Hearts asked after Issei showed her his coin, the Vatican side to be precise. Kuroka can live with me and Tiamat, and I think you should come up with the fate of the 6. Come on Kuroka, let's go for a walk around the Vatican before going home, Issei said with that smile that washed away all her worries. Yes Issei, she said, exiting the office through the door with him, still scared due to the fact that his aunt was one of the deadliest women the 3 factions had to offer. Now have you heard of Otto? Griselda asked, looking at the 6 with a smile that put Fried Selzen and several others to shame. No. The leader asked. Well, in the early 20th century Mexico and other countries handled a run law, as it is known by its rough translation. Those who escaped alive were granted freedom, and those who didn't were left to die on the shooting range or land they reached, Otto being the most popular of these cases. Griselda answered. Now, the 6 of us will have a thorough sparring session, and if at least one of you is still standing up by the time the sand in the Hercules reaches the bottom, then the 6 of you can go back to the underworld under one condition. And that is? The leader asked. I don't want any of you near my nephew or his friends and family if your intentions are hostile, or else I will show you the full reason of why Gabriel chose me to be her queen, Griselda said, her tone now serious before the 7 left in a cross. Hi to residents, Kuo Town, Japan. Don't worry about Auntie Griselda, she's a really nice person when you get to know her. As for my Seraph, you'll eventually get to meet her, Issei said, walking to the 2nd floor of his house before reaching a door and opening it, showing an average bedroom. Will the other devils try to hunt me down here? Kuroka asked, still slightly worried. Not at all, my house was modified by my mother to prevent unwanted teleportation and aura detection. It also has the resistance necessary to endure town-level damage, Issei said, as he looked at her. If you need something, my room's next door. Bathrooms at the end of the hall and phones downstairs if necessary. In case you have a friend or want to check up on your sister, Issei said, smiling softly, earning a soft hug from the Nekashu. I can't call her now, I had to leave her in the underworld, she said, crying a bit. It's okay Kuroka, I'm sure we'll find a way. For now, let's get some rest, we'll go out tomorrow to buy some supplies and clothes for you, and I won't take no for an answer, he said, gently petting her before earning an involuntary purr from her. Nico? Issei asked, chuckling. Nekashu, she said, spawning her cat ears and tails. Well, you don't look so bad. Now get some rest, I'll make breakfast tomorrow, he said, breaking the embrace and heading towards his room. What did I do to deserve this? Kuroka asked with a feeling of unworthiness in her mind. 2 years later. A dapper teenager of brown hair and matching eyes was putting several items in a basket, smiling as he did so. It had been 2 years since the night he had met Kuroka, who had become an older sister of sorts. Taking the house rules imposed by Tiamat into account, her kimono was now the length of an average one, also showing much less than her former kimono did. The times were rare when she would opt for a shirt and jeans, saying old habits die hard. Not that they minded, for she also selected several styles and color combinations. Ice, what are you doing Naya? Kuroka asked, looking at her figurative younger brother as he was putting several things in a basket. Just preparing things for my picnic with Gabriel, what for? He asked, briefly looking at her before he kept putting these items in. Oh nothing, just wondering how you're going to tell your girlfriend how much you love her, Naya, she said in a teasing tone, which earned a blush from him. While his love for his Seraph was not as obvious as one would expect it to be, the Nekashu and Dragonis had been around him enough time to know just how much he loved Gabriel, and thus teased him to no end when Gabriel and the other angels weren't around. For the last time, she isn't my girlfriend, at least not yet, he said, muttering the last part. Not yet. Ooh, Issei and Gabriel, sitting in a tree, kissing. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby and wait, you can reproduce, right? She asked, doubt arising. I don't really know. But the point is, I plan on confessing to her today, or maybe soon. We've spent 5 years getting to know each other, slowly getting closer and all. Despite my birthday being a few days ago, she wanted to do something with me, just the two of us. I am now of age in the standards of the supernatural, so to say, and that means I can do a few more things and all," he answered, giving his sister a smile. "So, you're saying that you would have confessed to her if it weren't for the age issue?" Kuroka asked, smirking. "Never mind," he said, carrying the basket before leaving in a golden cross. "Teasing him never gets old," she said, before looking at a spot in the ground that had sunlight entering from a window. Laying in that spot, she slowly fell asleep. End of the here. So that's it for today's video guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.